Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to another installment of the Guide Collective Roundtable. I'm Reed. I'm going to play host today. Andrew's had some extra things on his plate this week and couldn't take time to get ready. So thanks for tuning in. Today we have a couple of new panelists. We've got Jorge from Spain. Good morning, Jorge. Oh, I'm sorry. It's morning here. It's evening for you. And Liz in Scotland. Hello.
Hello.
And we're calling this our election program. I'll jump into that in just a minute, but as always, I think I feel like I need to explain my backdrop. This is a picture of Namibia. And the reason I put Namibia up, it has nothing to do with what we're going to talk about today, is that I want to announce to all of you that we do have a new program going every other week when the roundtable is not meeting. I'm doing a new program called Guide Collective Connections, or GC Connections for short, which is more of a one-on-one interview format. And in next week, I'm going to have my friend Todd Wentz from South Africa. He's an expert on Southern Africa as my interview guest. And we will be talking about Namibia. So I wanted to put Namibia up. And by the way, I have been absent for a while. I had to deal with some family issues, but you might recall I like to have my coffee cup of the moment. This is also my Southern Africa coffee cup. This is the sand art of the ancient people of Southern Namibia and Northern South Africa. Okay, enough of that stuff. We want to jump. Oh, I'm sorry, Andrew. I did not mention one of our regular panelists, Andrew Vallone there.
I've been demoted, buddy. I'm not the moderator. I'm just yeah, I'm throwing my opinion.
Hey, once you gave me control, you should have known you were going to end up on the trash heap at that point.
That's fine. I don't know. Third place is okay by me.
Can I just say,
you're out? I guess you're out in the vineyard again there, yeah. Andrew.
Yeah.
Can I just say that Reed's hair looks as if he's sitting on a Harley Davidson bike. You look as if you're traveling through Namibia at a high speed because your hair is blowing in the wind.
Yes, and it's always like that. We've laughed about that on past episodes as well. I don't know what it is about my backdrop. It's actually green. It's a green screen, so it should work a little better than it does. But yeah, it always looks like somebody has plugged an electric socket into some orifice. So anyway, okay, we're going to start off today talking about voting. Of course, all of you tuning in that are from our American audience, it's a bit of a mess right now. We've got all of our traditions are being turned on their heads. There's all this concern about voter fraud. The president making accusations about the fact that mail-in ballots might be fraudulent, which of course all the experts are saying is not true. There's all kinds of political maneuvering going on where they're trying to restrict the number of places that people can drop off a ballot or the number of places that they can go and vote in person. And of course, all of this has been complicated by the COVID pandemic, and people don't want to go and wait in long lines or be in rooms full of people like the normal voting process would be. This is not news to anybody in our country, but we thought it would be good to find out how things are for expat Andrew, in his part of the world, and in Spain and in Scotland. So we're just going to go around the horn here, and I'm going to have Liz come up next and tell us what is voting and campaigning, because Liz, campaigns started more than a year ago in our country. Every year it gets longer and longer. So how is voting, campaigning? I won't include politics. Let's keep it to voting and campaigning. How is that the same or different in Scotland than what we have here in the United States?
Okay, well, the first thing to say when I talk about Scotland is that we've actually subject to two, because we have Westminster Parliament, which is the Parliament for the United Kingdom, of which Scotland is a part. But we also have our own devolved Parliament, which is at Holyrood. So we have a Scottish Parliament. So we actually have 5 elections within the UK. We have one for Westminster. We have the devolved parliaments because Wales and Northern Ireland also have their devolved administrations. We have the European Parliament, or we did have, and then we have local elections as well. And then add on to that, we have referendums at various points where the government goes out and asks the people. So we have a lot of elections going on. But when it comes to Westminster, it's the same across the whole country. So the 4 parts of it all have the same. So we have 650 MPs down at Westminster, and they come from constituencies across the United Kingdom. So when we go to the polls for our Westminster MPs, we have a first past the post system. So we're only voting, and once they get the required number of votes, that's it. They're in. So then it's the majority that get the most of the votes that form the government, and they suggest the Prime Minister. In Scotland, it's different. In Scotland, it's a newer body, and so there we have proportional representation. So we have first past the post, but when we go to the polls, we actually have 2 votes. We vote for our MSP, and then we also vote for our political party, and there's a list that they get drawn from them. So it's all very uniform across the whole of the United Kingdom. I think that's the first thing, because I get struck by the fact that you've got so many different systems going on from what I understand within the US. And the other important thing would be that we have an electoral commission which oversees the whole process. So in terms of our campaigning, it starts when the parliament is dissolved. So it's a very limited period of time where the various candidates will go out and they'll canvass the people. We also have strict controls on how much they can spend on their campaigns. We have strict controls over how much can be donated from donors to each of the parties. So the whole thing is moderated and controlled in a way that I don't really see so much in the States.
Mm. Hey, just for our viewers' sake, Liz, can you maybe say a little bit of an explanation of what exactly you mean by Westminster? I think I know what you mean, but let's be clear. And also, first past the post, that's not an expression that we necessarily would understand in the United States. I think the meaning is clear, but if you could just say a couple more words about that, please.
Okay, so yeah. Westminster, I'm talking about Westminster and the Houses of Parliament. So down in London, we have the United Kingdom Parliament. Now it's 2 houses. We have the House of Commons, which is basically the lower house, the one that does all the business. And then we have the House of Lords, which is the higher house, which is really just approval. It can't really do very much to change acts that have been put through by the House of Commons. So that's where, at the moment, our centre of government is fixed. But in recent years, we've had a move towards more devolving power to the nations, because you have to remember, and we'll come back to this later, the United Kingdom is 4 constituent nations. It's not just England. And so over time, we've had devolution. I'll come back to that later on in the discussions. And so we have Holyrood, which is the home in Edinburgh of our Scottish Parliament. Now, the difference between the 2 systems of election is that for Westminster, when you're voting for your MP, so my constituency is here in Fife in Scotland, each constituency consists of about 55,000 people. So they're all the same number of voters. So that then impacts on the size. So in the central belt of Scotland, the constituency geographical areas are quite small. So I go and I vote usually for a political party. I'm voting for an individual, but most people vote along party lines. And so what happens is that when that person has a majority, they are first past the post. They get that seat in Parliament. Now, it doesn't matter that could be 51%, 49%, and the other 49% of the people are disillusioned because they don't have any say in it. And that's where proportional representation comes in, for all the masses of votes that are cast in favour of other parties to give them a say. Does that help?
Yes.
This is a complicated subject. I picked the short straw coming on here for this.
Okay. All right. Let's move over to Jorge and hear about the same issues down in your part of the world in Iberia and Spain.
Right. So just listening to Liz, I thought our system was complicated, but but in a way, it sounds very familiar. I have to tell you a very short story, just to explain everything. Just after Franco, everybody knows that we had a dictator here for 4 years, you know, since 1936, when he declared the war to the democratically elected government in those days. The war ended in 1939. 1939, World War II started, and then until 1945, we were theoretically, we were kind of neutral in World War II. Anyway, Franco died in 1975, and then the king was proclaimed, and we don't have a coronation thing here, it's just a proclamation, but it was under the very extreme conservative, or let's say, Franco's government still in those days, because it was just barely a week after Franco died. So we went through a political transition, very hard years in those days. But anyway, it became, just to make a very long story short, just before the Civil War, there were 3 autonomies already declared in Spain, which was Catalonia, the Basque Country, and Galicia. Galicia, just to locate it over the map, if you look at the Iberian Peninsula, on the western part is Portugal. So the portion above Portugal, that's Spain, right? And that region is almost a square, that is Galicia. So those 3 autonomous regions, they were already declared before the Civil War was declared by Franco. And anyway, just when we had our constitution approved, and then we had the first general elections, those 3 autonomous regions, I'll let you know a bit more about that in a minute, they were automatically given back the status of autonomous regions. Okay, and now comparing an autonomous region with the United States, you have a federal government over there and you have the state government. So it's kind of the same. It's a hybrid in between United States system and nothing. And with the years being proved that it might not work in a long term. But anyway, that's the way it is now. So there are 17 autonomous regions in Spain, 2 in the islands, Canary Islands and the Balearic in the Mediterranean, and Canary Islands in the Atlantic, and then the other 15 are in mainland. Each of them has their own electoral period, all right? Sometimes it might coincide in time, in the day, with the general elections, but also it have the locals, you know, the city halls. So it's really complicated to make the 3 of them in the same day. But the rules here are very simple. You do not have to register to vote. You are registered as a citizen when you're born. Obviously, your dad or your mom, they both have to go and register in the, you know, in the civil register. And then when you are 14 by law here in Spain, you have to have an ID card. Okay, that was implemented in 1940s by Franco just to control the population. But we took advantage of that. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying that it can be used in a very good way. And when you are 14, you have to go to a police station with a birth certificate. Obviously, you have to be taken by your parents because you are underage. And then you have to have that one. That one has your photo, a very small amount of data in the back, and also your now digital fingerprint in it. So if anytime you are in a random control or whatever, I don't mean by that we are under any control at all, right? But if you are in a random control, let's say a road control for whatever, you just show that. And what they do, the police now, they slot it into a card reader because it has a chip and it tells who you are. So that is good. When you are 18 years old, when you become 18 years old, you don't have to register, as I said, because you are already registered since you were born. All you have to do is to go to your district area office from the city hall and to check where you have to go and vote. Always by law has to be in a public school. Each neighborhood in Spain, in any city, in any town, they have a public school, at least one, okay? My neighborhood, there's a coincidence that there is 2 schools. My neighborhood is a big one. So I need to go and check where. Now you can do that online, right? And then you just go and vote. You don't need to register. About register by mail. Register by mail is allowed only, you have to apply for it only a month before the elections day. Doesn't matter the elections, whether local, regional, or national. And then you have to apply for it. They send you to your home the paper that you just fill up, and the system is the same. The ballot, thank you. The system is the same as this, as Liz mentioned. You're voting for a party. You're voting for a person, but that person belongs to a party, right? And that's the way it is here as well. And we also have two chambers: the lower chamber, Chamber of Deputies, and then the Senate, which is the other big one. Sorry. And then you are allowed to give that vote by mail only 15 days before the elections day. Elections day by law is always on a Sunday, always. The day before the elections, that means the Saturday, is called Reflections Day. So it's totally prohibited, not allowed at all, not in any media, not in any car with the big speakers making publicity of the parties. It's called Reflections Day. It's just to let people think, decide who they're going to vote for. Not even in the news, nothing at all. So no one can talk publicly about politics in any media. And of course, it is 15 days, the electoral campaign. The pre-electoral campaign starts 3 months before. But just before the pre-electoral campaign, like everywhere else, all the politicians, when they decide to, we're going to inaugurate this public school here. We're going to inaugurate now this high-speed train line here. And, just to gain voters because they're doing good for the society. So that's how it basically works in here. And it's really simple and easy. So when I see sometimes, and please forgive me about saying this, I don't mean to insult anybody, but going through all the mess that they are going in your country, Reid and Andrew, really breaks my heart, how messy all that is when it's so simple and easy over here.
No offense taken, Jorge, because I feel a little sick about it myself. So yeah, I like some of the simplicity of what both of you have shared that might be beneficial in the United States. Let's wrap up with Andrew on this. Andrew, as an expat, as an American citizen living in the EU, what's voting like for you?
Well, I'll say this, and my experience is only in Slovenia. I don't know how it's done elsewhere, but the U.S. Embassy gives you, first you have to be on their email list, and that's easy enough. But the U.S. Embassy here in Ljubljana in Slovenia will send you email updates periodically before elections about here's what you need to do, here's the reminder. Remember, if you want to vote from abroad or whatever, you have to. I think it might have been like, by the end of September, you had to do whatever you needed to do. And then they gave you like a website to go to. And then I think it probably depends on what state you're from. I think like, right. I was like, I'll go to Washington State and see what they have. And I figure, okay, this is what I need. Okay, I'm Washington State, I'm King County, because that's where I used to live. And I still have my business registered in Seattle, King County. So I go through those hoops. If you lived in a different state, then I don't know, because to be honest, I'm not sure if all states allow like the kind of online voting or basically they send you electronically ballot, you fill it out and send it back to them, because the U.S. Embassy did mention about like, here's the protocols if you need to come to the embassy and vote. And like, here's the COVID protocols now in case that. And now in the last 2 weeks, which Ljubljana is like in this red zone and there's all these restrictions and curfews, there's probably additional things you might have to jump through. Fortunately, I did this before 4 years ago. So I kind of knew, hey, I'm good as long as Washington State didn't change any laws. I'll just go online, before whatever it was, end of September, and do what I needed to do. As far as, how I'm viewing things, I try to view things very little. So I wake up and, check Facebook like a lot of people do. And then I realize, there was a debate on last night. So I almost want to just unfollow anyone I know in America because I'm not interested in reading all this. And I've thought about this before, when I'm thinking about expat stuff. And it's like how you view your country now that you've been away from it a while. And I've been gone 6.5 years. is, people could say like, what's the, like, how do you sum up the US? And some people could say it's a nation of immigrants, or it's a nation of, like there's American exceptionalism and all these other things, which all could be true. I kind of look at it now as the US is a nation of addicts, addicted to anything and everything you could think of. And a lot of that is the 24/7 news cycle. And then the accompanying social media part of it. So when Jorge tells me, oh, the day before is reflection day, and there's none of this crap going on, and there's nothing on the news, and it's like, oh man, that's like, that's great. We probably need that. Like, hey, every other day needs to be like that, because it's crazy. And then everyone only preaches to their own choir. And I actually read some social media stuff here in Slovenia when people talk politics, and I notice actually people could have, fairly decent and like humane conversations with each other when they're on opposite ends of the spectrum. And I think the way it's set up in the US, because everyone's just like, I must be tuned in 24/7, and then I must post something and share this other post and all this stuff. It's like, it's so divisive. It doesn't, and I don't think it makes any difference, because everyone already kind of knows where they're at anyway. So I just try to avoid it all. And to be honest, what I've heard from Liz and Jorge, and I don't really know because I don't vote in Slovenia and I don't really pay attention to that whole process here, so I'm not sure how it is. But all that's what they talk about sounds certainly way better than we have in the States. And I think people in America need to realize they got to unplug at some point, or they got to just stop whatever it is, preaching or talking, or just, it's like, okay, we all know we need to vote, but it's like after that, it's just overkill. I'm sure, I think, Reed, you're probably in the same boat as me. It's just,
yeah.
Well, I have to say, Andrew, we would need a 2-hour special broadcast to unpack all the things that you brought up there, which really excellent, very excellent. Liz, I know you had something you wanted to add on to that conversation.
No, as Andrew went through it, he came more, but we've been speaking about the technical side of our elections and how they're monitored and how we campaign or whatever. But I think what listeners are probably interested in is how we really feel as voters as the electorate. And Andrew moved on to that in what he was saying there. And I think generally, both in the States and certainly talking from my own experience in the United Kingdom, we feel tired and we feel disillusioned. You have to remember that we have gone through a long phase of Brexit. And this ties in with identity, which we'll be coming on to. But I was actually in Croatia when the results came through of the referendum as to whether we would belong to the EU or whether we would withdraw from the EU. And my husband woke up, switched the television on, and he said, we're out. And I thought he was referring to the hotel, we're putting us out of our bedroom. I said, what do you mean? What do you mean? He said, we're out. I said, what? He said, we're out of the EU. And that just came like a splash of cold water. A lot of people had thought, that it was about identity, it was about determining our own destiny, taking our own decisions, but never thinking it would actually happen. And since it did happen, it has just been such a mess. And we've had to endure all of the debate and the discussions around this, becoming more and more and more disillusioned, regardless of your political stance, just the way in which the politics are dealing with it. And then on top of that, we've then seen COVID cause divisions, and particularly in the UK, what is happening is that each of the devolved authorities are ploughing their own course. They are going, I even saw in the newspapers yesterday that Manchester wants devolution, Manchester wants independence, because the mayor of Manchester is at odds with our Prime Minister Boris Johnson. So it's all about divisions and about arguments and nothing, there's no leadership. I think it's there's a vacuum. There's no one coming in. And that's why in Scotland, we have a First Minister called Nicola Sturgeon, who has very high ratings with the public. And you at least feel that Nicola is leading you somewhere, maybe down the garden path, but at least it's somewhere.
I almost asked you when you were talking before, Liz, but I didn't know how long a discussion it might lead to, but we do need to move on to another subject. But can you give us a 30-second version of, I know there was a referendum in Scotland prior to the Brexit referendum in the UK to leave the UK. Has all of this Brexit mess led to a re-energizing of that movement, maybe to break away from the UK?
Absolutely. At the polls at the moment are showing a majority for independence. It was close before. I think one of the things that ties into our electoral debate, one of the radical moves that came out of the referendum in 2014 was that 16 and 17-year-olds were given the vote. And people said, oh, what do they know? You know, how can they make a decision at that age? But the argument was it's their future that they're voting on. And it was transformational. It was taught in schools, it was discussed and debated. There was such a high level of engagement. We had an 84% turnout at the polls. And so that has transformed politics in Scotland, that people, young people particularly, are much more engaged than they were previously. And with the disappointment and disillusionment, the lack of leadership down in the UK Parliament, Scotland has been stepping up, as has Ireland and Northern Ireland, and we have completely different routes out of lockdown, different decisions being taken, and there's a complete breakdown in the lack of trust between the devolved parliaments and Westminster. So yes, it is absolutely fragmenting.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that. We might have to have this program again down the road and you know, dig a little deeper on some of these other things. But for now, I want to move on to another subject. Before I do, just a little personal announcement. I live in the mountains of Colorado. There is a wildfire on the way. I might have to get up and leave at any moment if the order of evacuation comes. It's actually fairly close. So I'm not panicked at all. I spent my morning packing up the car with, you know, documents and important things, but I will be grabbing this computer if I have to go. So in case if you hear a scream and then my little screen goes blank, you know what's happening.
All right. I'm good. I'm taking back my moderator job then, if that happens, buddy.
That's right. You can have your revenge on me because I won't even be here to defend myself. All right. We wanted to actually we've spilled over onto our second topic already a little bit, and that's of cultural identity. This is something that we Americans, by and large, can't really relate to, and that's that there are many people in Europe that are of ethnic you know, have essentially their own country within a country. Scotland is part of the UK. Liz was talking a lot about how the complications are with that. In Spain, of course, Jorge mentioned the 3 different autonomous regions there. So we're going to explore that a little further, talk about what that's all about. And we're going to go to Jorge first. Jorge, take it away on that.
Okay, so for those who don't know me, I am from Malaga, same place where Pablo Picasso was born. Also Antonio Banderas, and I am the 3rd world celebrity, you know, from Malaga. And well, the thing is that...
but the best looking.
Thank you. Thank you, my dear. Anyway, I feel Southern. I am from Malaga, I am from Andalusia, and I'm very proud of my area down there, my cultural heritage, the things that have printed in my bloodstream and in my veins and everything. And believe it or not, I have, I did some 3 or 4 years ago, the Ancestry.com. I don't intend to give any publicity, but just to know my backgrounds in here. And I have, believe it or not, 3% Hindi. And that is coming from also Eastern European, Egyptian, from the Caucasus, Northern Africa. And look, I look like a Danish, right? But I am from Malaga. That comes from my mother's side. My grandfather, that he died very young, he was 40 when he died, on my mother's side, he was Gypsy. And now I want to take the chance here to take the opportunity to difference the Gypsies from the Romans, okay? Romans, they stayed, there were 2 branches and they stayed over there in Eastern Europe. And there was another branch many centuries ago that they decided to nomad on their ways and, you know, following the African continent, the coast, until they reached nothing else but the water, and then they eventually crossed the Straits of Gibraltar, and they established in the south of the Iberian Peninsula, including Portugal as well. Okay, so whenever I say Iberian Peninsula, I mean Portugal and Spain, and whenever I say Spain, I mean obviously Spain. So the southern, I'm very proud of the heritage and there. I feel Madrileño because I've been here in this city. I'm a city person, and I've been here for many years. More work opportunities, more chances, more everything. But regarding the Basque country, regarding the Catalonian, which used to be part of the Kingdom of Aragon, and then Galicia, I have to say a little anecdote in here. 1936, February 28th, there was a referendum in southern Spain, in Andalusia, to vote for an autonomy. And the answer was yes. But like about 4 months later, civil war started. So officially, Andalusia was not declared an autonomy before the civil war. That's why it was not included in those three I told you earlier that they gave. The state gave back immediately the status of autonomy. Now, as I said, with the years, everything is like in regions. So talking about the Basque Country, I do admire the Basque Country, the heritage in there. I do love also the roots that the Catalonians, they do feel. But the Basque Country status is different to the Catalonian, because the Basque Country as an identity is still the same, it hasn't changed. It has three little provinces in the southwest of France, close to the Pyrenees. Navarra, which is the old Kingdom of Navarra, included all that, and what today is called politically the Basque Country. Three regions, Navarra and the Free French, that makes the 7 provinces of the Basque Country, right? So Catalonia is a different issue. Catalonia was it was a county of a kingdom, the Kingdom of Aragon. And Aragon might lead you to something here in your brains from 1492. And that's very familiar for all Americans, 1492. A few years before, Fernando from Aragon wasn't only what today is Catalonia, it was a larger possession. Okay, it was a kingdom and unified with Isabel from Castilla. And in those days, it was also a huge kingdom regarding sizes. I always say to my people when I explain a little bit of history that we have to forget completely how borders are today and how they were in those days. And especially among royalties, they were convenience marriages. So they were arranged years or even generations before by their fathers, grandparents, great-grands, etc., 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 in order to unify territory and gain more power. So the Kingdom of Aragon, it wasn't only what is Catalonia, as I said, it was another region today called Aragon, the Comunidad Valenciana, which are another 3 provinces, the Balearic Islands, Southern Italy, Kingdom of Sicily, Naples, the Netherlands, and also the Castilla. So, as I said, I feel very proud of being from Malaga, from Andalusia, from my heritage, and I do understand completely the feeling that any other region, anywhere in the world, they might have. And you have any more questions about that, or shall I follow, or what?
Well, let's go ahead and move on to Liz, and Andrew will be watching. If any questions are coming in, we'll certainly put those up. Liz, do you have any more to say about the subject of cultural identity and country within a country?
Yeah, well, I'm a Scot. I've always got plenty to say, but as a Scot, we're quite a pugnacious nation. We like a good argument. We like a good debate. Our coat of arms, the motto below it is "Nemo me impune lacessit," who dares meddle with me? And so all through history, we have fought with England, our nearest neighbour. And we've looked to France for the Auld Alliance, because the French liked anything that was going to stir up the English. So there's been a tension all the time there. And I always look to my American guests and say to them, look, if I say to you, do you see yourself first and foremost as a Texan or as an American? They'll say, an American, of course. And that's the difference. If you say to somebody from England, do you see yourself as English or British? they'll say British. If you say to somebody from Scotland or Wales or Ireland, Northern Ireland, do you see yourself as British? They'll see themselves in their identity. And this is a generalisation. I'm a Scot first and foremost. It's Scotland that runs through my veins. I am Scottish. Now, there's old nationalism and there's new nationalism. There's the old nationalism of everything about the English is bad. As a nation, I don't think that that stands anymore. I think that what people are looking for is to have recognition. Recognition first and foremost from England. You know, if you go to watch BBC on the television, until very recently, and within the last few months, it has changed. They've suddenly, the penny is dropping, that they have to take notice of this. But the BBC will talk as if England is Britain. And then they'll add on something about Scotland or something as an addendum at the end of it, weather forecast or whatever. And that is a constant irritant. If you go overseas, I used to represent Scotland in the education sphere. The British Council would talk about when you come to study in England. And I would say, and Scotland, oh yes, of course, you need to have 3 A-levels. And I would say, we don't study A-levels in Scotland, we study Highers. Do you? You know, so it's this lack of any cultural awareness of the differences. And there are distinct differences that are becoming greater. One of the major issues for Brexit was immigration. That was a leading factor for many people in England voting for Brexit. In Scotland, we have absolutely no issues with immigration. And in fact, we welcome immigrants. This COVID crisis has thrown up the problems that arise when we can't have a supply of people coming to work and live in Scotland. When you vote in Scotland, if you are resident in Scotland, doesn't matter where you come from, all over the world, if you are resident with a permit to live in the country, you have the opportunity to vote. That doesn't happen in the rest of the UK. So we're quite different. We are outward looking. And as a result of that, when it came to Brexit, there were only 2 areas in the whole of Britain that voted in favour of remaining part of Europe. One of those was Scotland and the other one was London. And so we have these divides continually splitting. Now, my aim is for us all to work together, but to work together, recognising the differences and the advantages that we can get from working as a group. And if that takes independence to come together and work collectively, then that's the way I would like to see it go.
Wow, fascinating. It's just a matter of respect, isn't it, on a base level?
It is. It's absolutely respect.
Before we move on to Andrew, Jorge, you had a question or a comment to add here?
I would like to make a question to Liz here. How do you deal, or how would you think that you will deal if anything happens in between Scotland and the rest of the United Kingdom regarding money? Because you have your own currency, right?
No, the Bank of England was actually established by a Scot the year after the Bank of Scotland was established. So we have the Bank of England sets our monetary controls, and this was the single biggest issue in the last referendum, because the First Minister at that time was a man called Alex Salmond, and he was repeatedly asked this, and he said that they would make that decision when when independence was voted for. And he said that they had the option of joining the EU and taking the euro, or we could have our own currency. But it was the Achilles heel that those that wanted to maintain the union kept on picking at and picking at. Come another referendum, that won't be an issue. They will have, a plan of how we will deal with our own currency. The thing is that if you split the Bank of England, Scotland has to take its share of the deficit as well as the assets of the bank. So it's a complicated arrangement to be able to do that. And as we move forward into greater and greater debt, it becomes ever more complicated. And sorry, just one final thing, but when we talk about devolved issues are things that are bespoke to our country. So in Scotland, in our parliament, things like agriculture, our legal system, our education system, our health and welfare services, these are all devolved issues. Those decisions are made in Edinburgh, in the Parliament at Holyrood. The retained or reserved matters are fiscal, taxation, and grants and how money is allocated, and immigration and defence. So those are big issues. And if at the last referendum, if we'd had greater devolution of financial powers, then we probably wouldn't be looking for another independence referendum. And that's become highlighted even more because Scotland hasn't had the ability to make its own financial decisions. How much do we borrow? We're going cap in hand all the time to the Parliament at Westminster to give us a grant of money, in spite of the fact that we hand over all our taxes to Westminster.
Okay, thank you.
Long answer for very complicated.
I was going to say, inside my head is spinning. I'm surprised it's not showing up on the screen here. Wow. Yeah, like I said, we might have to do this again to unpack it a little in more detail. Andrew, have you got anything to chime in on here?
Well, I'll just be real brief. Like, I'm the kind of person, I just don't identify. I mean, like, I have a US passport. That's, you know, up until this year, that was a great passport to have, but that's about it. I don't think of myself in terms of like what country I belong to, especially now that I don't live in that country. So I like to observe other people, and you know, I'm in a different country. I'm in a different country that used to be part of a country that had that is now split into 7 different countries. So for me here, and I mean, for most of my travels, and my wife's Russian, and where I go and where I run tours, I'm just around Slavic people a lot. So I always like to look and try to figure out who's from where, you know, things like that, and try to figure out what are the differences. What's the difference between a Croatian and a Slovenian who are right next to each other? I think that's like the longest 2 nations or 2 different types of people have been bordered that have never fought a war against each other. And it's like, so what's the difference between them? Or what are their, you know, like, how do I identify them? Or what traits do I, and I like kind of playing that game, actually, and seeing what I could recognize, and how people from these different Yugoslav republics that are now their own independent countries, how they behave, and how they're different. And of course, like, how they're similar. So there's certain questions you could ask, like, hey, Slovenia, like, what's your probably most disliked country? Like, where do you still have bad blood from? You could ask that and go around all the countries and kind of find different answers, or maybe sometimes 2 countries might have the same answer. And it's interesting for me because I don't have any skin in the game. And I kind of just look at myself as a very neutral person. So that I do enjoy seeing these differences, and it's very interesting because we don't have that in the States at all. I never think, oh, what state is this guy from? Montana, or could he be from Iowa? You know, unless it's some accent thing. Sometimes it pops up. You don't think about it, and you don't really care. But over here, it's like, wow, okay, there's a bunch of people that used to be all in the same country, and in the last 25, 30 years, you know, now there's like 7 of them. And so that's what I find interesting.
Yeah, I've always said, you know, a country these days, and actually throughout history, it's just a line on a map, right? It very rarely reflects the actual cultural history of a region, or very often anyway. Okay, we need to move on to our 3rd topic for today. I've called it travel blinders. This is a new travel skill that everybody needs to be developing if you continue to travel. And what I'm talking about is the explosion of middle-class tourism that we've seen in the last 2 decades, but has gone into hyperspeed in the last 10 years. And that's, you know, you go to a place like the Vatican museums, and the crowds are just overwhelming. And I've had many people on my tours whose experience of the Sistine Chapel, you know, they've their whole lives, they've wanted to see the Sistine Chapel, but it is so crowded when they get in there that they end up not enjoying the experience at all. So what I want to do is just talk a little bit about strategies, right? Excuse me, Neil.
Sorry, mandatory evacuation now.
Okay. My town is being evacuated. Let me just, I'm going to finish my thought, being a professional journalist.
You got Maya's keys?
Yeah, go, Neil.
Okay.
So basically what I was saying is what I tell my groups before we go in. I don't sugarcoat it. I say, look, this is miserable. There's, you know, it's going to be hot. It's going to be sweaty. There's going to be people bumping up against you. I say, go to your Zen place, right? Don't let this take away from the experience. And you know, that's a pretty nebulous thing to say to them, but I'm just trying to encourage them to whatever they can do mentally to compartmentalize and expect those things, and then to just be as focused as possible on the resource there, right? The art of the museum or whatever it is. And then I give them a little bit of a practical thing too. And I'm thinking specifically of the Vatican Museum right now. I say, when the crowds are just pressing in on you, look up. Every ceiling in the Vatican is spectacular, right? Just look, don't have your eyes focused on what's the crowd. Every once in a while, give yourself a mental break by looking up at the ceiling and just take that in a little bit and then move ahead slowly. Or the floor. The floors are spectacular in there. So I try to give them a little bit of a mental strategy, and then one that's really practical as well. Very briefly, I also work a lot in the developing world, and this need for blinders is completely different there. It's a matter of public sanitation and poverty that gets in your face. And a lot of places that I travel with my tour members, Egypt, India, Cambodia, there's a very, very high hassle factor where there's just desperate people trying to survive by selling little trinkets to the tourists. And it's a constant barrage. And in that case, I give people the strategy of eyes forward, don't engage. You don't have to be mean. What you want to be is completely non-passionate at all, right? Don't be angry, don't be frustrated, eyes forward. And then very, very importantly, learn how to say no thank you in the local language, right? Mm-hmm. Not just English, no thank you. No thank you. La shukran, right? In Arabic speaking countries. That one I've got forever, right? So la shukran means no thank you. So you just eyes ahead, and never, never, never say maybe later, right? Because these people will remember you. They will remember you. So, okay, I'm going to sign off and turn this over to Andrew. You guys go around the horn, share your strategies, enjoy the rest of the program, everybody. Don't forget to tune in next week for when I've got Todd Mentz from South Africa on the Guide Collective Connections interview show. And I'm off down the canyon to get away from the wildfires. So
okay, buddy, have a safe evacuation.
Yeah,
I'm sure it's fine. You know, those evacuations they're very, very aggressive, right? Meaning, I'm sure the danger isn't as imminent as they're suggesting, but I am going to go. So, hey, thanks everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, well, hey, it's interesting. You're both of you first time on Roundtable, and this is the first time on Roundtable we've had like some actual emergency. It's too bad that kind of sound, beep,
yeah. Or the smoke. I was waiting for the smoke come out. That would have been really effective.
Yeah, it's great. We're all in our little like areas in Europe, like, oh, it's nice. No wildfires out here. So I'll take Reed's topic real quick, and I'll just throw a few words on it. Then you guys can add in. I wasn't looking at it so much as like, here's what I would tell my tourists when with these issues. And I really, where I'm at, I don't really have mass tourism issues quite like, some of the places I think Reed goes to. But for me, like the thing that gets me, because I live in a very, very clean country that's all organized with recycling and garbage, is going to other countries and seeing garbage problems. Those are the things that drive me nuts. So if I'm gonna have any chance of solving those things, for the most part, it's just like, hey, I'm gonna talk with the local guide I know there, or whoever's there, whoever works in tourism that I know, or whatever friends, and just see like what's going on. Like, is there any kind of movement to get a recycling program done or anything like that? Because I'm sure you've both been to places where you've got this great panoramic view on the train or the bus or whatever, and then all of a sudden there's like a sea of plastic bags. And You're just like, what the hell? Because it's so different from where I'm at. And I'll just put in one short story. I actually have a friend of mine who's a cyclist, and he cycled from Spain to Istanbul. I think he's done that twice. And he goes through the Balkans, and he's always saying like Albania and Kosovo are really beautiful, but you got to like look from here on up because there's so much garbage. And he told me a story once where he was just sitting in a park looking around, and there's some younger kind of teenagers playing, and he just pulled out like 10 euros or 10 bucks or whatever, and he actually paid them. He's like, hey, you guys got nothing to do. Why don't you clean this up? Like, you get some money and the park is clean for maybe a day. So like, actually that might not be a bad idea in some places, because hey, why not? And then maybe some of these kids realize, oh yeah, the only way to get rid of this problem, other than maybe implementation of of recycling programs and other things, is the people who live there, not just the people like us who come through for 2 days, that they actually, like, they have to take care of it. They have to clean up. So that's what I have. Liz or Jorge, either one of you want to?
I have an anecdote about that, bed of garbage that you said in a very cynic in a viewpoint. If I can tell you, I'm going to try to make it very short. I had a lady in one of my tours some years ago that she was a descendant of one of the expeditioners that went on the 4th journey of Christopher Columbus. So he remained there. He was buried, but he left in the testament that if any time any of the descendants in the family went back to Spain, he wanted his ashes be thrown in La Mancha. Okay, we all heard about the book Don Quixote de la Mancha because he was from somewhere around there. So we were where the famous windmills are in one of the towns in La Mancha, and she was just doing her little ritual, right? Because she came with that little thing. We didn't know anything about that. I have an assistant in that tour. And then, while all that was happening, I was waiting for the group down the road with the bus. And I saw my assistant coming totally pale. And I said, what happened? So just telling you the whole story. While she was doing that, he didn't see her, what she was doing. And then he looked down and saw that bed of rubbish just around, the bed of everything. And then he said, how people can be so, unconscious about throwing everything away here. So she thought that he was telling her. And she went, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. And then he said, what happened? So they clarified among themselves. And there was a funniest story I've ever heard and had in one of my trips, So I understand what you're talking about. Now that place is clean, because the tourist board of the area took over it, and they're doing a very good job in maintenance over there. And about travel blinders, I just give my people, doesn't matter what kind of age they are, always a little lecture to wherever we're going. If everybody knows the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, the Alhambra in Granada, in Madrid, the Prado Museum, etc., etc. So before we start going up there, I just take them for 5 minutes saying, hey, look, we're going to see one of the best pinacotheques in the world, the Prado. We're going to see one of the most visited palaces in the whole world, which is the Alhambra palaces. Or we're going to see the Sagrada Familia, which is a masterpiece, and a unique masterpiece. Might be the only chance in your lifetime that you're going to see it. So just don't think that we're going to be the only group having the idea to go over there. You're going to see a lot of people that had the same idea as us. So don't let that spoil your experience. Just is your dream. That's why you're doing this trip, to see this sighting here. Just focus on that, okay? We don't need to worry about if anyone is pushing us just to trying to get through. Just let it go through, or let it go through, and you're just there to enjoy. So it's like a little try to take them in a Zen mode, right? And it always works. Always works. Yeah.
Good.
Thank you.
Liz, you have any like Zen advice?
I'm completely Zen. I'm Zen all the time. No, I think I would sum it up in 2 words. Either embrace or avoid. There are some events, like for example, if I take Edinburgh, the city of Edinburgh in August, we have the largest arts festival in the world. And so literally millions of people come. And the Royal Mile is just wall to wall humanity. And if you want to go there, you just have to embrace it. You just have to get down and enjoy it with all the other people around about you. That's your choice to be there, embrace it. Edinburgh Castle, equally, absolutely full. So then you have the decision, Do I embrace that or do I avoid it? And for avoid, I think there are strategies. For example, going to Edinburgh Castle first thing in the morning or last thing in the evening. I take a lot of groups to Urquhart Castle, which sits on Loch Ness. And as you can imagine, with all the Nessie hunters, it's very busy. Now you can come to that by road and you queue up to get in through the turnstiles, or you can come to it by the water, as people would have done in the past. And you cruise up Loch Ness, you stroll in, and everybody thinks, ah, and the guide is just absolutely magic because she has transported you in a way that nobody else thought of. The fact that they're paying extra to be able to do that doesn't really occur. But so avoid, have a strategy. Or finally, do you really need to see Edinburgh Castle? You know, if it's on your wish list of things that you've always wanted to do, absolutely fine. But there are so many other castles where you want to see another single person. So have another strategy. So it's all about thinking out the strategy.
I like that idea because I'm kind of, my personality is usually like all or nothing. I'm like all in on something, or I'm like, I don't really care. So I really like the embrace or avoid. I think sometimes it was easier when I was a younger traveler just to embrace it, like, oh, I'm here, I gotta whatever. And the older I get, the more times I've been to these places with those situations and crowds, you're just like, it's like, yeah, I don't know if I'll be making it to lunch today because I just don't even want to like walk through the gate with all those hordes of people or whatever. So
absolutely. I mean, if you're a tourist, you're only doing it once. Have a thought for the poor guide who could be doing it every other week of the year.
Exactly. Yeah. Sometimes I think people they think, oh, you're a guide, great, you get to come here all the time, and it's like, yeah, but if you do anything all the time, it's like, oh, okay, I'm so tired of it. So the last thing that Reed had on his agenda was he wanted us to talk about a song that brings us back to a travel experience or a travel time. And if anyone is still watching us on Facebook, like, I think everyone in the comments section needs to guess what song Reed was going to have, because we don't know. Like, he didn't reveal his like song and travel moment list. So if you're still watching on Facebook, put in the comments like what you think Reed's pick for the song is, and then, once he's done with his evacuation protocol, he can come back on the Facebook and reply to your comments. So I'll be real brief here. So the first time I went traveling in Europe internationally was 1999, and it was those song things. I'm a big music person, and I always relate music to either emotion or a place or something like this. I guess maybe I had a Walkman, but I wasn't like listening to a lot of music because I'm in Europe for the first time. I just want to, absorb everything. So the songs I heard were the things that no matter what country I went to, was like, oh, that song's on the radio, or that's on the TV again in the bar. And the one that I couldn't avoid was this Eiffel 65 Blue song. It was like some Italian pop group. And it's like, it had this video with these stupid like animated aliens, and it's one of those like Euro pop, totally catchy earworms that you might hate, but like once you hear it, you're just like, okay, I'll embrace it. I give in. I'm not going to fight it. And that was one of those things. It was like, didn't matter what kind of place establishment I was or what country I was. It was just like always on there. And it actually, because it's got such a stupid but goofy video, I've shown it to my kids and they think it's hysterical. It's like, yeah, like this is the soundtrack to my first European travel. So like, if it's not the song I like so much, but it's like, that's great. Like, yeah, I hear it and I could think of all those different places that I heard it in the first time. So.
Mm-hmm. I have here one piece of music ready to play just for a few seconds if you want me to. That every time that I listen to this outside of my country, it literally brings tears to my eyes. So let's see if this works. Can you hear that? Okay, so that's was more than enough. Can I say what song is that and the author?
Of course, because I don't have a guess.
Okay, it's the concert for Aranjuez. It's not the very beginning, which is the most known part. It's just halfway, well, not halfway through, it's just like about 2 minutes after the beginning. And the guitar player is Paco de Lucia, okay? He was considered one of the greatest guitar players, flamenco guitar players in the whole world, and he died about 3 or 4 years ago of a heart attack. But the composer is Maestro Rodrigo, that was his name, and he was blind. And if you guys want to search concert of Aranjuez or for Aranjuez, it depends, you know, the search engine comes one way or another. With Paco de Lucia, you will be absolutely hypnotized about the way he played the guitar.
Cool, that's great. I have never heard of him before. And just looking at some comments on Facebook, people really enjoyed the audio snippet.
Good, thank you guys.
Liz?
If I was to do the same as Jorge, the thing that makes the hairs on the back of my neck rise up if I'm overseas somewhere is to hear Highland Cathedral on the bagpipes. But if you're not attuned to bagpipes, I won't play them for you as Jorge did. I'll leave it out there. If you want to go, Highland Cathedral on the bagpipes, it's fantastic. But in terms of my own personal road trip, a couple of years ago, before all this nonsense started, my husband and I did a road trip across the States. And we started off at Hilton Head and we went across to Hendersonville, Newberry, Knoxville, Nashville, and we were driving. I'm not sure if it was the leg from Knoxville to Nashville or Nashville to Memphis, but we just saw this, we needed to stop for a service station, and we just came off, and I had seen this sign for a museum. I just came off and stopped at the services, and just right next door to the services was the Tina Turner Museum, and it was her old schoolhouse from Nutbush that they had moved in. And it was absolutely fabulous. I'm a fantastic Tina Turner fan, and I just loved it. So whenever I hear Nutbush City Limits, it just transports me back. It was just the most magnificent happen chance.
Right.
I think I always think of music as like the great time machine that just, you know, you could go to wherever, whatever experience or wherever you were, or it's just, you know, all these things you've forgotten about, and you hear a song and you're just like, yeah, I mean, there's things that just pop on, and I could be crying in 5 seconds, or just thinking, wow, that was 32 years ago or whatever when that song was popular, and I heard it. So, well, guys, we're out of time for today's show. So I know this is kind of turned into a very unique show. We do hope Reed is okay. And actually, I think there's a lot of things we talked about on this show that, as Reed said, we can go back to and have a deeper dive on. So Liz and Jorge, if you guys are available, we definitely would like you back on again. And maybe next time, Jorge, you could bring a couple of more of these music pieces in. Because actually, I think music is a little like, you know, we've talked about it just a little bit, but it talks so much, and it's a great way to show people about different things of your country. You know, because so many of us are just so used to just like, well, we know these composers because they're world famous, but we know very little about very regional and specific things. So I'd love to go into music some more. So thank both of you for being on. We appreciate it. Hope you had a good time.
Thank you. Thank you for giving us the chance to do this.
And everyone else watching, we'll be back in 2 weeks from now. So I'm not even sure. I think it's November 4th or 5th. So 2 Thursdays from now, we'll be back with the new roundtable. Until then, we'll try to go through some of your questions and comments on Facebook and get back to you and give you some answers. So thanks for tuning in, everyone. And until next week, or until next episode, ciao.
Ciao, chicos.
Bye.
Adios.
Bye.